Well, good morning, lords and ladies. Welcome back to A Morning with the Lord. I'm your friendly host, Lord Duffield. Today is the 22nd of the 11th, 2021. A Monday today. We've got some fine, rainy weather here again in the New England of Australia. How's everybody this morning? I hope everybody is well. I have here for us today a list of SBS news stories. The world, Australia seems to be fairly still stuck on the COVID debate. We're going to look at that a little bit later. It's something to do with the world's fish population and how Australia is pretty low on the rankings when it comes to conservativeness. But we're going to start off today's episode with a look at importing labour. The story here is titled, "Concern as Australia looks to Asian farm labour with a new visa scheme. Now, before we get into this, I have spoken about this on the podcast before, especially when New South Wales, Sydney specifically, put out a report that it had 200 jobs that it just could not fill, and that they were saying we should be looking to overseas, and I then voiced my disagreement on the topic. And before I even start on a rant, not that this is going to turn into a rant, but it very well could. But let's start this story here. The story was released, I believe, Monday 22nd, so this is today's story. It is feared a new visa scheme to bring Southeast Asian workers to Australian farms may have consequences for a willing and able Pacific workforce. The Australian government is in negotiations with a number of countries in Southeast Asia regarding its new agricultural visa, but no agreement with a partner country has been finalised. It is hoped arrivals would be on Australian farms within months, but questions remain about whether the new scheme is needed at all, and if so, what it means for the Pacific, for local producers and for the workers themselves. The subheading here, need for new visa scheme questioned. It says, Professor Stephen Howes, Howes, Director of the Development Policy Centre, questions the need to look outside the Pacific for workers. While there is a shortage obviously this year, it's ridiculous to suggest that the best way to address that shortage is to create a completely new visa, negotiate new agreements with a whole new set of countries, and get workers in, he says. It's obviously problematic to have two visas for two different sets of countries to do the same work. The labour pool from the existing schemes, which includes 9 Pacific Island countries as well as Timor-Leste, is far from depleted, Howes adds. This is interesting, actually. I don't think this is what they're going to get into, but I was just walking past the TV and saw a report regarding the vaccine status of PNG and Pacific Islands in particular. Now, this hasn't been something that I've ever heard spoken of. I mean, they talk about the lists of countries and how they're going on vaccines, but they don't normally bring up PNG all the Pacific. It's normally just European and big countries like America and UK. So I find it auspicious that at the time of trying to introduce new visas and work schemes that we're calling into question the vaccine rollout in the countries that we normally pull from. It might not be related at all. I just thought that was interesting to suddenly hear the Pacific Islands mentioned twice in one morning. We'll read on here. There are many more workers from the Pacific who are willing to come here. It's not like there's a shortage. The new visa is available to skilled, semi-skilled and low-skilled workers across a broad range of agricultural industries, including meat processing, fisheries and forestry, according to the federal government. The Pacific programs will remain the primary scheme for meeting workforce shortages, especially this summer peak harvest season, says a government fact sheet dated September 30. More than 15,600 Pacific and Timorese workers are currently in Australia, and government has committed to doubling that number by March 2022. There are also 55,000 pre-screened Pacific workers ready to come to Australia, subject to available quarantine places. Bloody hell, 55,000 pre-screened Pacific workers ready to come. Resumes in, hands are up. We shouldn't have any trouble then. And they've got to be easier than pulling from further away. And they're pre-screened. So that means they have, I would imagine that pre-screen means, they've already passed muster with COVID relations. Who knows? I wanted to, I've worked in a few, farm work type jobs. Just near us here is the largest glass house set up in the southern hemisphere, and that was like 10 years ago. Now they've doubled in size again, so I don't know, they might even be the largest glass house, but I kind of doubt it. But anyway, it's a huge setup just for a giant tomato farm owned by Costa Exchange. And they have workers from, I believe it's Tonga, I think. But anyway, they're there, wherever these workers are from, they're there with a deal with the Australian government, between the two governments. And what the deal was, they would come over here to work, and their government would garnish a percentage of their pay. Now, this was fairly low paid work anyway. It wasn't the worst, but it wasn't the best. So they're definitely working, because they're such a big company, they can pay the minimum of the minimum. But these workers had to be housed over here, and I kind of felt sorry for them in a way, because I knew how much I was getting was very little to enjoy. You were getting by, but it wasn't a really substantial amount. And these families and all that sort of stuff had to live on even less, because their government took a percentage. But they were fine with that. They liked it, and it helped their country out a lot. And these are the sort of deals that the government has. And while losing jobs to Australians isn't bad, isn't good, it didn't really affect here too much, because we don't have a very high population. which I imagine is the issue when it comes to a lot of this farming work. And no one's going out farming if they've already got a job in town. Now, most people won't even do it. One, because it can be hard work. Two, because you really don't get paid enough. You have to bust your gut. Because, like a lot of picking places, you get paid not by the hour, but by how much you pick. And, you know, a lot of people just aren't interested in that, especially when it comes with, you know, high fuel costs to and from work. Sometimes you'd be driving over an hour just in travel time to get there and back, you know. So, you know, we do have shortages when it comes to the farming sector, no doubt. But like it says here, 55,000, that's a pretty large chunk, you know. I don't know if, you know, I would imagine that is a pretty sizable chunk of what might be missing. But let's read on here. Now the subheading, it says, government says new program will be an addition to existing visa pathways. The federal government stresses the new visa program is about assuring the sector it will have access to workers in the future. It is in addition to the existing visa pathways, including the Pacific programs, that provides assurance to our primary industries that they will be able to access the unskilled and skilled labour they need into the future, Agricultural Minister David Littleproud says. Phase 1 of this new visa will be restricted to a smaller number of employers already accredited through the Pacific schemes. Phase 2 from April 2022 will see a steady increase in both the number of workers recruited and countries participating. The new visa comes as a requirement for British backpackers to work 88 days in regional areas if they want to extend their stay is phased out, leading to fears of shortfalls in the seasonal workforce. That says British backpackers, what about the rest? Anyway, Cotton Australia Chief Executive Adam Kay says about 80% of more than 400 applicants looking for work via the Cotton Jobs Australia platform over a 5-week period do not hold Australian passports, meaning they may be ineligible or not able to begin work immediately. Over 80% of more than 400 applicants. Is that not just the weirdest fucking statement? Cotton Australia Chief Executive Adam Kay says about 80% of more than 400 applicants looking for work via the Cotton Jobs Australia platform over a 5-week period do not hold Australian passports. Did they have to pick, like, there's no indication of how many applicants it gets on the regular. They've just picked 400 applicants and pulled out a percentage of them. And over a 5-week period. How far did they have to whittle that down before they had a number that sounded bad? I honestly think I just lost brain cells trying to understand that statement. Everyone in this room is now dumber for having heard it. We appreciate the government's efforts in the Pacific, but there are still short to medium term needs that must be addressed to assist farmers. UK says, I'll tell you what can assist farmers. Woolworths and Coles can start paying decent bloody prices again. That's the biggest issue. I mean, do you remember, listeners from Australia here might be aware that a couple of years ago, I think it was only a couple, it wasn't all that long ago, but Coles and Woolworths had to put up the price by 5 or 10 cents on the milk so that they could get money back to the dairy farmers, because we had this terrible sort of couple of years, especially when it came to dairy farmers, and we were losing lives to suicide. It was awful. You hear these absolutely terrible stories of people that work for companies, because the farming here, a lot of the time, you'll have a company invest in a farmer, so they will give the farmer a lot of the equipment and whatnot, and the farmer produces a certain amount and pays back to the company while they get profits, while they pay off the infrastructure they've sort of been given. So you would get these representatives for the companies going in to see, to have talks with the farmers, and just finding families that have committed suicide because they just lost everything. And there was not enough money in the dairy. They're just strangled so hard by big companies like Coles and that sort of thing. Anyway, so yeah, they had to put the price up of milk so we could increase the pay to farmers. Fucking great. Finally they did something, because we all knew it was going on. We all hear about this all the time, especially if you live in a rural town. But it turns out that Coles wasn't even giving that money back. They just put the bloody prices up and reaped the profits. Absolute shit go. I couldn't believe it when I heard that, and you just hear it as a little report. That should be absolute fraud. That's what we thought we were paying extra for, and here they are just upping their fucking bottom line. Oh, it's when you hear stuff like that you lose a little bit of hope. And this is the thing. This is why it's important to pay attention. You'll hear on the news something like that happens, and people will go, "Oh well, great, the farmers will be much happier," and not think about it again. And then when it turns out nothing fucking happened, it's this tiny little report in the back of a news headline somewhere. So yeah, back to my original point. That's how you fix this fucking issue. Get farmers a little bit more money so they can pay their fucking staff a little bit more. Because I tell you, there ain't many people, many Australians, putting their hand up for that job. Not because it's hard, but because it doesn't fucking pay. At all. It is very, very hard to make money unless you work your arse off. And then, you just run the risk of screwing yourself over physically. I mean, there's no... Why in all honesty, when you weigh up a decision, would you decide to destroy yourself for fucking $6 an hour less than someone working at bloody Big W? You wouldn't. The only people I know that really go out there is because they enjoy it. And, usually once you get a bit older, you get, better jobs. You're not just picking, you can drive tractors and whatnot, but, there is a bit of a ladder to climb. Yeah, that's the biggest issue here. And you don't fix that by bringing in more bloody workers from other countries that are happy to do it. And they're happy to do it because they get less over there. All this is doing is propping up a failing market, and we're going to crash one day and wonder why. And this is fucking why. Alright, back to the story. There's another subheading here. It says, calls for Royal Commission to examine exploitation. However, senior social justice advocate for Uniting Church Australia in Victoria and Tasmania, Mark Zernsack, sees no evidence of a shortage of Pacific workers. What the Oh my god. I'm running on. If this article doesn't start... bugger off. Senior social justice advocate for Uniting Church Australia in Victoria and Tasmania. Who the bloody hell has he got? Why the fuck is he making comment on the shortage of workers in rural areas? Holy shit. Oh my god. Okay, reading on. Zernsack has been involved with the Pacific Seasonal Workers Program. Oh, okay, here we go. He's been involved since 2014 and says the pandemic has meant arrivals have been unable to get home, forcing them to live off their savings. So how's he been involved? He's the fucking justice advocate for Uniting Church. I imagine that a percentage of these people would have to be of the Uniting Church, and he's some type of hand there. Otherwise, what the bloody hell has Uniting Church got to do with the bloody specific workers program? Yeah, it says here, since the pandemic has meant arrivals have been unable to get home, forcing them to live off their savings, which is no doubt. And these are seasonal workers. Fuck, I wonder what they ended up having to do. You know, I seriously wonder. It says, of the workers we have contact with, there is a very large portion of them that lack work. Yeah, no one's going to be given these, because a lot of them don't even speak English, like, very well the best of the times. They're only meant to be here on short-term visas to do some work. They don't care about, they never had to think about totally integrating. This was just an experience, and just cheap labour for us. They're not getting any other work than that cheap labour once that dries up. We're not putting on people to run counters that can't speak English. Goes on to say, there is a question mark about if we need this agricultural visa at all. And even if that case can be made, our argument is the details of the safeguards need to be publicly available prior to starting to bring workers in. There's a bit of detail that's missing, and given you've got 55,000 workers at least from the Pacific willing and able to come, what's the rush? All workers have the same rights and protections regardless of citizenship or visa statutes, and they will apply equally to workers under the Australian agricultural visa, the federal government says. But Howe says there are strategic and economic reasons not to expand the potential labour pool outside the Pacific. In contrast to countries with high populations and developing or established manufacturing and tourism industries, Pacific countries are typically isolated, remote, and don't have the same employment opportunities. They need these labour mobility opportunities a lot more, Howe says. And yeah, totally. Like I was saying before, that's a big thing for the Tongan government to, get that extra money income to the government's coffers straight away as well. This isn't just some sort of, they getting their citizens more money so they can boost the economy. That money goes directly to their governments, which helps in obviously many, many ways. And ripping that out for someone else would would cause serious uh, backlashes through the poorer nations that it does help. And it's almost finished here. We'll continue on. It says they need these labour mobility opportunities. Yep, just read that. Sorry. There are also concerns about exploitation of overseas workers, a problem that some believe needs to be addressed as a priority. Totally. The Mayor of Bundaberg in Queensland, which is where I spent my first, years of life in Bargara. Big up Bargara. Anyway, the Mayor of Bundaberg in Queensland's agricultural hub wants a royal commission into the treatment of overseas workers to cut through competing interests without bias and make recommendations that provide a clear way forward. Most farmers do the right thing, but there are concerns that shonky labour hire firms are leading a race to the bottom, Jack Dempsey says. Now, besides everything we brought up in that, I've got one other massive problem with this story. Okay, Australia looks to... The title here, concern that as Australia looks to Asia. Now, I'm just going to scroll back here because I am sure that it originally said China. Concerns... Oh, no, that is the right heading. My bad. I just thought that must have been what they were talking about. But that's... like, what other countries would they be talking about? They never listed the other countries besides what we have in the Pacific. I don't believe, unless I scattered over that. Number of countries in Southeast Asia regarding its new, but no agreement partner country has been finalised. So we haven't finalised any countries that we're working with. They're just sort of saying why pull out of where we already are when we're set, which is a fair cop. I don't understand what that could be for. But then again, I'm sure South Korea and that sort of stuff don't have the strongest economies compared to us, could use some help, but I'm sure it's not nearly as bad as in those tinier nations. I mean, we're in East Timor near bloody constantly. You hear about it, we used to hear about it all the time growing up. I remember that because the army was generally over there working on building, helping build towns and infrastructure and that sort of thing. And that was one of the big, selling points for the army when I was growing up. It was on a lot of the recruitment ads, was construction work and that sort of thing that you would do through them. But anyway, that was the end of that story, and a few issues raised. But going back over it, that story really had nothing to do with much, except what could happen. But keep your ear to the ground. Yeah. Right. All right, now on to overfishing. Now, this is from another story from today, titled, "A tenth of the world's fishing population on brink of collapse, report finds." Australia is overfishing more than a third of its fishing stocks, while 1/10 of the world's fish population is on the brink of collapse, according to a global study. Australia has received a D grade on marine sustainability, with 38% of its assessed fish stocks classified as overfished, an international study has found. The Global Fishing Index also found a tenth of fish stocks globally are now on the brinks of collapse, reducing to 10% of their original size. And that is a huge drop. A huge drop. It's not just a tenth of the percent, but that 10% has dropped to 10%. And like, that doesn't probably sound like much, but that is, like, imagine if we lost a tenth of the population. 600 million or some shit. I don't even know really what the world population is at. I think around 7 billion. But anyway, yeah, that is a massive chunk. Wow. Anyway, continuing on. Australia has a well-developed fisheries governance system that, where applied, has the capacity to ensure sustainable fishing. The report, which was released on Sunday, said. However, Australia has made limited progress to restore fish stocks to sustainable levels, and many stocks remain overfished or unassessed. Anyone who's seen Moana knows how bad this can turn out. It says, the study found 38% of the nation's fish stocks are overfished, and 60% of its catch comes from unassessed stocks. There is insufficient data to estimate how healthy Australian fish stocks are, with a large number of species caught at low volumes without stock assessments. This represented a challenge for Australia to manage. Australia needs to apply a strong management and increase knowledge of fish stocks across all fisheries in its waters, the report said. I just want to interject here. This is when it says there about needing to apply strong management and increase knowledge of fish stocks. I wonder how that goes, how they go about doing this. I imagine they're trying to take note of how much is being caught and then working on an average. But it makes me wonder how this is managed. I don't know much about the fishing industry. I've never worked in it. I'm a landlubber. But I've had family and all that. They love fishing. And when talking about water in Australia, I found it really surprising. I think we only have one university in Australia that offers marine studies. I may be wrong. There may be like some specific thing that I've heard about, specific courses. Like maybe everyone does, but I don't think so. And I'm pretty sure that one is in Western Australia. And don't quote me 100%, but this is something I remember being spoken about on a couple of times. And it's insane. Australia, we have the Great Barrier Reef, for God's sake, and the bloody university with the fishing fucking shit in it, with the marine shit in it, it's on the other side. I mean, there's nice reefs in WA too. Like, you got the Ningaloo Reef and that sort of thing, which is absolutely amazing. There's awesome stuff over there. But it astounds me that we have such a low number. Because I remember your high schools in Australia here have kind of focused specialities. Like, I went to the first high school I went to was an agricultural school, which is funny too because we were in Cleveland on the coast, but that's where the Wellington Point High School above us slightly, they had a marine biology course you could take. Like, instead of agriculture, they worked on marine biology. And I find it astounding to find out later on that there isn't even universities on the East Coast that have these sort of facilities. I mean, why? This is Australia. We're an island nation. We have some of the most impressive, like the Great Barrier Reef's one of the wonders of the world. Why the hell are we not backing in this type of bloody study? It astounds me. then again, we all just grew up loving to eat and fish. I think we had too many biologists who just wanted to know what we were catching. So it could be a result of that, but I just, I might be wrong. If anyone knows, like if I'm talking utter shit, let me know. Because I would like to know. When I heard that, I was astounded that Australia hasn't invested heavily into this type of research before. And harkening back to this story, it makes me wonder how they would really go about evaluating these type of stocks without large numbers of people who do this sort of work. And I imagine it comes down to the fisheries, but if the fisheries are anything like national forests, I don't think they would have the numbers to do so. So you would think a high university type of population that would do this stuff simply as research projects would come in very handy. They could be a tie-in with part of our fishing infrastructure, and would make a lot of sense. I mean, I would almost sort of relation that to health and safety officers on most work sites. You would think it would be at least prudent to have a few researchers in that who regularly look into this type of thing and could act even as an almost policing body of themselves. Yeah, anyway, we'll get back to the story there. I just wanted to bring that little anecdote up about Australia not having many university fish related, marine related courses. Now it says it recommends Australia improve sustainable fishing by expanding science-based Oh well, fucking hell! I've got to stop talking one paragraph before I need to. Starting with information collected and analysis of its fish stocks. The country should also improve how it manages overfish stocks and take corrective action where needed. Globally, the report found 1/10 of fish stocks are on the brink of collapse, with 49% of assessed stocks as overfished. So we've overfished half the fucking ocean. Over half. Like, it's not all, like, over half is down below good levels. That's crazy. Absolutely crazy. Mining magnate Andrew Forrest, founder of the Minderoo Foundation, which facilitated the study, said no country was doing near enough to protect the ocean from overfishing. Yeah. Oh, mining magnate Andrew Forrest, I mean. Bloody, I wonder how much mining runoff and whatnot affects the ocean's population. But that's not what the study's about. Moving on. Half of the world's assessed fish stocks are overfished and nearly 10% are on the point of collapse, he said, adding that this threatened ocean ecosystems as well as livelihood and food security for millions of people. Every single country in this index needs stronger fisheries management, better laws and policies, better enforcement, better data collection, and more science-based decisions. Absolutely. It's incredible to think how little our decisions are actually based on science. It is really astounding. The Global Fishing Index program led Kendra Thomas Travaili said 52% of the world's marine catch lacked basic data. Yep, that doesn't surprise me. This program is due to a lack of fisheries monitoring, compounding by a lack of transparency among governments and fishing companies about their fishing activities. Yep, doesn't surprise me either. Like I said, if the fisheries are in the same state the national forests are, they're probably pretty screwed. Alright, we're going to move on to the next story now. Okay, we'll finish off today with two COVID related stories. As much as I don't really want to delve into it, it's probably important. And this one is titled "No Early Date for Unvaccinated to Access Eased COVID-19 Restrictions in New South Wales," Premier says. Now this is coming after a swath of protests yesterday, I believe, in Sydney, which had to do with the relaxing of COVID-19 regulations, especially on the impact it has on unvaccinated people. And this is important, I think, because after the last podcast, when we looked at Scott Morrison coming out saying it's time to let go of these sort of mandates now that we've reached the vaccination limit, it's interesting to see how every state's rolling out with that, because Victoria was holding off pretty strong, saying that he wasn't going to follow what Scott Morrison said at all. But that was yesterday, and today I saw reports of certain mandates being eased. So this is obviously at a point of whether we're going to lift all this stuff or not. And after hearing Scott Morrison say that, I was a little disappointed to hear everyone's sort of being strongly against that and just calling it a campaign stunt. But yeah, what are you going to do, I guess? But yeah, honestly, I never thought I would hear it, because I always think of the worst before I think of the best, and I half expected all these mandates to go on forever. So let's have a read here and just see what the New South Wales Premier has to say. So, New South Wales Premier Dominic Perrottet says unvaccinated people will not be granted an easing in COVID-19 restrictions any earlier than December 15th, despite thousands rallying against vaccination requirements. All of these measures are not tailored for rules for the sake of the government. They are tailored to keep people safe, and that's what we're focused on, Mr. Perrottet said in Sydney on Sunday, the day after en masse protesters descended on the city. And I want to stop it right there, because he's saying COVID-19 restrictions any earlier than December 15. Now, even though they might be disappointing to some people, that's not very far away, like 3 weeks. And like I said, I honestly didn't think them to be rolled back ever. So the fact that he's even saying on December 15th is encouraging news to me. And, while I totally back the right to protest, maybe we should just wait these 3 weeks, because we don't want to see them start sparking reports about COVID spreading or some new fucking strain to worry about. Knock on wood, that will never happen. But yes, it's only a couple of weeks, so hold on to your nuts. Anyway, New South Wales recorded 176 new local COVID-19 cases and 2 deaths in the 24 hours to 8 p.m. on Saturday. An unvaccinated woman in her 40s died at Sydney's Royal Prince Alfred, and a fully vaccinated man in his 80s died at Liverpool Hospital. Both had underlying health conditions. The state is inching closer to the 95% mark for first dose vaccinations, with 94.4% of residents over 16 years stepping forward for at least one jab. Some 91.8% are fully vaccinated. New South Wales Health's Dr. Jeremy McNulty said that there had been multiple cases in schools across the state. Now, this is what my next story is actually relating to as well. I find it funny that it's brought up in this one, but my next one is relating to New South Wales parents having to watch for cases of COVID-19 in their children. Before we get onto that, I'll keep reading here. It says, "We are urging parents to remain really vigilant to help protect the rest of the school community," he said on Sunday. "Symptoms in children can be quite mild and not obvious, so if they get any symptoms at all, please take your children to a testing clinic." 2 Sydney schools and 1 in Newcastle remain closed due to COVID outbreaks. Of the 12 to 15 year age group, 75.3% are fully vaccinated and 81% have received at least one vaccine. Now, I might not even read this other article, because it's saying it's most likely going to be saying exactly what that just said, and how parents need to be vigilant. And also, I find it interesting to know that there are still schools closed due to outbreaks. I didn't think that'd be happening, considering we're over the 80%. But the reason I wanted to talk about that, I'm not going to fully run on, but this frustrates me every time I see it, because the whole point, they went on and on about how schools could remain open, and we did end up closing schools while I was in WA and over here on the East Coast. It did end up happening, but the first thing to reopen were the schools, and like I've said in a previous podcast, we've covered a story where it said that they theorise most of the main outbreaks from now on will be occurring at schools. And my argument is, and always has been, if kids can contract it, why are we sending them to schools? I see it nothing as more than a bunch of whinging parents not wanting to fucking deal with their kids 24/7. Harden up. For God's sake, as a parent, you're meant to do the right thing for your child. Every fucking mother I talk to goes, I fucking would do anything for my children. Well, it seems except spend time with them, because fucking the majority of them sent them kids back to school straight away without a second fucking thought. And that is because, I guess I am running on, but fuck it, it makes no sense. It didn't make sense in the first place, and the whole reason these parents would have, I'm not totally just saying mothers, it's but both parents and whatnot, all formalities aside, it's not just them. The government came out, the news and everything, the information at the time was, it's sweet to send kids to school because they can't get terribly sick from it. The symptoms in them are going to be greatly reduced. But they could be carriers, and that could and would very well spread to the people at fucking home. So what was the point? What was the point of it? Maybe because that it showed you did care, and you could argue that, oh, I didn't care about myself, I just want my kid to get an education. But I'd like to I've spoken to many people over my time on this planet. I've had a couple of conversations with a few people, and every prick thinks they're fucking smart. You know, school was nothing. If you come out of school and have kids and you're all fucking like, man, school rah-rah, doesn't matter, it was a piece of shit anyway, I learnt more fucking doing whatever. Well then, go and teach your kids. This is a time when we should be really looking at ourselves and, like, you know, all the rights come back onto us then. We've got to raise the bloody kids. It's 100%. They're not at school. There's no one else that could be blamed for anything. So it's time to take one good hard look at yourself and think, do I have the intelligence to teach them? If not, perhaps I should try and increase that intelligence and try and learn something. You know, get back a few of my old skills. And do I want to? And if so, stop. If not, stop fucking arguing with other people about how they do with your kids, because, Jesus, you've given up, as far as I'm concerned. If that's the case. Oh, don't get me wrong, school's hard. Hell, they changed the math again. Like, my kids going through school, I have real trouble following the way that they do their math, which I remember my parents saying to me when I was at school. And why the hell do you think that would be? What is the... It could just be that we are literally trying to give mathematicians a job and someone has to write a new textbook every fucking 10 years or whatever, or 20 years. So they have to figure out new ways to do something simply for the sake of being able to have that job. Or is it to create confusion? I mean, it caused nothing but confusion when I was a kid. I couldn't get my parents to help me with my maths homework, and my parent, well, like my dad especially, he is brilliant at maths. But for him to look at the way that I figured out my workings out in long division and that sort of thing, he was completely stumped. And I've had that myself, looking at the maths of today. They're doing weird things with ones and remainders that I was never taught, and it works out the same, but it's just this totally different way of doing it. But why? What's the point of that? If only, like I said, to create jobs, or B, to cause fucking confusion. Anyway, that turned in a little bit more of a rant than I had anticipated. But like I said, we won't read the other story because I'll end up just saying the same thing again. So we will bring this episode to a close, I believe. Thank you all for joining me on A Morning with the Lord. I am Lord Duffield, your friendly host. And I hope you all have a lovely day. Until next time.